Yo, this is Terrence Gaines, aka Brother Tech,
And this is Nika Montford, aka Tech Savvy Diva.
and you're listening to and or watching the Snob OS Show, the show for Apple snobs, where we talk all things Apple and then some. We definitely want to thank you back for another show. I think this is episode 124, where we are moving right along. And like I said, we want to get right into the show. So we're going to start with the lowdown, where we talk all things Apple. So we got a lot of stuff on the show, so we're going to get right into it. First and foremost, last week Apple released iOS 14.5, and I think we talked about it a little bit last week. Talked about all the nice features, where it be to unlock your iPhone using your Apple Watch if you've got all the latest updates. We talked about a couple other things. We talked about AirTags being available, that need iOS 14.5 in order to utilize AirTags. Well, that was last Tuesday. Well, this week they have announced another update, iOS 14.5.1. In addition to iOS 14.5.1, there's macOS 11.3.1 and there's watchOS 7.4.1. And the reason why we are stressing that you update to 14.5.1 even after you probably just updated to 14.5, because this is a security issue. Specifically, this update is meant to fix arbitrary code execution exploits present in WebKit that lets malicious websites run unchecked code on your device. Of course, little old me, they're not running code on my device. Well, just go ahead and update and you ain't got to worry about it, right?
It's super quick, it's super easy, and if you don't have it already on your phone, just go ahead and turn on the automatically, update your phone. Just make sure you keep, you do your backups regularly and you'll be fine, because most of my devices updated by themselves and I came back with, the latest updates without really too much intervention by me.
Right. And, when those updates take place, you want to make sure your devices are charged or charging. And they are connected to Wi-Fi, and they will do that automatic update overnight. So again, like I mentioned, I know you probably already just updated to 14.5. Just go ahead and update it one more time, just to make sure your Apple devices are safe, to where nobody's actually executing anything on your devices on your behalf.
Exactly.
All right. Next up, AirTags can't be added for family sharing. So this was interesting, right? So I was doing, of course, I got AirTags or AirTag. Let me say it correctly. I got a pack of 4 AirTag, and I actually set it up, just one, just to test it. And also, I'm doing a story in PC Magazine for things you need to know about AirTags. And one of the things I found out was, doing my research, is even if you have enabled family location sharing in family sharing. So what that means is, if me and Nika were in a family, she could enable family sharing and share her location with me, of course, through her iPhone, through her Mac, whatever she has on her person. If she does that location sharing, I will be able to open up Find My, click on Nika's device, friends, and I'll be able to see Nika's location, right? Even though she may have that turned on to where me and her can share that information, you can't enable AirTag to be shared with a family member. And my question was, why would I want to do that when I already know her location because she's enabled it? Why would I want to enable an AirTag that I have connected to my keys to be shared with Nika? And some of the people came up with the example. Let's just say me and Nika share cars, right? She takes her car to work. She loses her keys at work, right? Maybe, I need the keys for whatever reason. She needs to share the AirTag location with me because for whatever reason, she can't get to the area to where her keys are, but I can. So she needs to share the location of that AirTag with me, so then I can then go find that key or whatever. Well, the way AirTag is set up, because Apple, again, is so heavy on privacy, they don't allow you to add your AirTag to family sharing so you can share the location of that device. And my guess is the reason why they do that is because, you know, you don't want people unknowingly being tracked. And technically, if you share an AirTag location, if you could share an AirTag location with somebody, you could track them with unknowingly, you know, but and
somebody trying to catch somebody. I think they probably put this in there on purpose.
Yeah.
Somebody trying to catch somebody creeping or
Right.
stalk somebody. Yeah, I can see where that would. I could see why they would do that.
And again, like you said, when you enable family sharing to share your location with me, you're making that effort. So therefore, you know that you're sharing, your location is being shared with me, right? With an AirTag, you know, I guess with an AirTag, the thing is, there may be some times where you don't want to. So therefore, but even if you don't want to, I still know where if I know where your device is or your bag or whatever you've tagged, connected the AirTag to, then I kind of indirectly know where your location is. So I thought that was interesting, the fact that even though you can share your location with me via the Find My app, and you use the Find My app to share AirTag locations, I can't share an AirTag location with anybody else. One, because it's registered to my Apple ID, and two, again, with the whole privacy thing, I don't think Apple wants to wade into those waters of those scenarios to where somebody was unknowingly tracked via an AirTag, right?
Right. And I think this may be a future feature that they add, but I think what they're probably doing in the meantime is making sure that their security standards are still followed if they go with this family option, meaning they may give the person the option to, you know, only share at certain times, or, you know, share in certain locations or certain instances.
Right.
I think that's probably the reason why we don't have it now, but I'm pretty sure that's coming down the pipeline.
With some, you know, restrictions, with some limitations. Like I could see if I could understand doing an AirTag sharing with somebody if you have a dog walker and you use the AirTag to connect it to your pet, dog or cat. Let's say dog, for example. And then the dog walker takes the dog for a walk. They lose the dog. Then I can share the AirTag location with them, so then they can kind of locate the dog, because you would assume they're in that same area. So I can see it definitely being something that they could do or add or include, but with some limitations. But for now, they're like, no.
Not right now. But I definitely see that coming down the pipeline with some additional security added to it and different restriction options that they probably just didn't have time to build into the UI.
Right. All right. So moving on, Apple and Epic, you know, the makers of Fortnite, finally go to court. Their trial started this week on Monday between Apple and Epic Games. For those who don't remember, the Epic is the company that makes Fortnite. They don't like Apple taking all of their percentages. They don't like Apple telling them what to do as far as the App Store. So Epic has, you know, kicked up a lot of dust, saying, you know, Apple is anti their, you know, a monopoly as the way they control their App Store. So they've taken it all the way to federal civil court in Oakland, California. Again, the only way app developers can reach Apple's 1.5 billion iPhone or iPad users is through the Apple App Store. Of course, if Epic or the makers of Fortnite get their way, you know, Apple will have no choice or will be required to offer additional ways, whether that be to offer Google Play Store on their devices or, you know, some other third party. They will definitely lose less control over the percentage in which they take as far as commissions from App Store purchases and revenue. So that could kind of change the game for Apple. Of course, if Apple gets their way, then, you know, according to Apple, based on, you know, keeping users safe and in addition to controlling the ecosystem, you know, to provide the features that Apple users are expected when they use an iPhone or an iPad, They want to keep control over that over that control, and for the sake of, like I mentioned, keeping control over the access ecosystem and keeping control over that money, because 30%, is a lot. But when you consider how much money developers have made, 30% may be trivial. Again, Epic doesn't think so. So like I mentioned, they have started going to court this week. So it'll be interesting to see the stories that come out of this trial. It'd be interesting to see, ultimately, of course, it'll be interesting to see what the court or the judge decides, because this is a pretty landmark case, because again, depending on which way it goes, this could be a major shakeup in how, Google, for example,
it's not just, it just doesn't have implications for Apple, but it has implications for all the other tech giants. And I'm pretty sure they're all watching this very closely.
Yep. So like I said, I just want to do a heads up to that to see where it goes. Because like I said, all the blogs and all the technological journalists and everybody, they're paying close attention to that, because there will be a lot of stories that come out of that. And I'm pretty sure we'll be, through the course of this story in this case, we'll probably be talking about different things. I saw some stuff already, but I was like, well, I don't have enough information on that, but I'm pretty sure we'll bring that up, bring up some stories that come out of this case, on weeks to come from this particular podcast.
But I have to honestly say that I think Apple either way has a contingency for this. So if they lose this case, I'm pretty sure that the legal over at Apple has figured out a way that they can make whomever pay for this if it doesn't come out in their favor. So on the broad spectrum, if they lose this case, I can see how that ripple would affect, through all of the tech companies into the whole tech space specifically. But I think that Apple probably already has a back door, so to speak, or some contingencies to not have to fully follow whatever the ruling is. But I don't know if this is just a big show for Epic, because I don't see how it is necessarily a monopoly when you can still access the game.
And not just that, again, we're Apple snobs, so we're biased, right? But from a practicality standpoint, you don't have to use an iPhone. You can use an Android, you can use, there's different other platforms outside of Android. You don't need an iPhone in order to
play this game.
Right. Like you mentioned, you don't need an iPhone to play this game. You can use an Android, you can use a computer, you can use a PlayStation, a Xbox, you can use all these other methods. So I think that's one of Apple's, hard, fast standpoints. If you use an iPhone, you have to use Apple's.
If it was only available for iPhone and nothing else, then you'd have a case.
Right.
Because there's still other ways to access the game, then it's not a monopoly.
Right.
A monopoly means one person owns it, one person controls it, and no one else can get a foot in. Right. And that's just not the case.
You have no options, right?
Right.
But at the same time, as a counter, there is no other app store on an iPhone. So you could paint it as you're taking away options for iPhone users who want another way to get apps on their phone. And if the only way I can do it, then you could paint that as a monopoly in sorts. But again, like you said, go back, we're not talking about the only way to get apps on an iPhone is through an app store. We're talking about the only way to get Fortnite on an iPhone. So that's kind of a different animal.
And they're talking specifically about their game, but I think the broader implications are, Apple, as we've mentioned many times before on this show, they have such tight control over their ecosystem. And essentially what it seems at face value is that, if Epic wins this case, it'll kind of be like a free-for-all where people can pretty much put whatever app in the App Store without any type of oversight to ensure that it's valid, ensure that it's safe,
Right.
ensure that it's not stealing anybody's information, that it's no fraud involved. And I think that might be what saves them, in addition to the fact that you can download it to other applications as well.
Right.
Plus, we also have to take into consideration the political climate, because the current U.S. government is all wrapped up in this, fight, against quote unquote big tech, even though they all use it every day, all day. And, it's just, the way we do business now. So it'll be very interesting to see how it all fleshes out with all of these different competing thoughts and processes and different types of special interests, whether it be from the private sector, whether it be from the public sector. So either way, the outcome of this is going to be significant, whichever way it falls.
Yep. All right. All right. So that is all we have for the lowdown. Let's move into second string, where we talk all things tech. And like I said, we got a lot of stuff to talk about here as well. So let's get right into it. Bless their heart, Facebook is back into our show, and I wanted to ask, have you started to see some of those pop-ups to where apps, when you open an app, it says, okay, well, due to privacy concerns, I forget the actual, let me actually pull up an actual, because I screenshotted one that I saw. It says, allow app to track your activity across companies, apps, and websites. Your app's data will be used to deliver personalized promos and offers to you. And then your options are to ask app not to track, or to allow the app to track your activity across companies, apps, and websites. So I did like a basic poll, like on Facebook, and asked, is anybody starting to see these pop-ups, and are you allowing apps to track you, or are you clicking ask not to deny? 100% people like, I'm blocking. So,
I'm of that same thought. I am seeing it a lot often. I used Drizzly today because I didn't want to go out, and I needed some tequila for my Cinco de Mayo festivities, since I wasn't going out like I normally do.
All right.
And it was the first time I'd opened the app in a while. And sure enough, when I opened it, it popped up, and I'm denying everybody.
So
off GP, deny.
Right. So based on my very informal, low numbers, non-statistical in any way poll, I can pretty much see how Facebook is kind of shook, because when you get a notification pop-up like that, it almost puts people on the defensive, regardless of the reason why it's probably a good idea to track you across apps and websites. The track it probably puts people on defensive to where they say,
what you looking at?
Right. And block, because I don't want you, mind your business. Right.
Stay out of my business.
Right. So, that jarring type of statement, Facebook has decided that they're going to, when the message pops up on, when you open up Facebook, or finally when it gets to, you seeing that message on Facebook, Facebook has resorted to showing their own screen, going in depth and explaining all of these changes and all of the reasons why they think it's a good idea. And in one of the bullet points, one of the reasons why it suggests that without access to your data, Facebook may have to charge users to provide services. So basically what Facebook is doing is like, all right, if you click this block, you may have to pay for Facebook. Is that what you really want to do? So they've resorted to begging. They're resorting to begging people in order to get access to your data. So I just wanted to.
And they're not going to charge nobody.
Right.
I think it's just a scare tactic. And some people might fall for it, but I think the bulk of people won't. Because how long has Facebook been around?
Right.
And it's been free all that time.
Right.
And,
personally,
people are invested in Facebook, but I don't think they're invested enough to put their money into it. Maybe businesses, yes, but, consumers.
And businesses are putting their money in Facebook via Facebook ads. I mean, that's the first thing. That's the first place e-commerce, online sellers, you know, whether you're selling a product, whether you're selling a course, whether you're selling whatever the case may be, the first place to go is Facebook ads, to take an ad out, because there are billions of people on Facebook, you know, so businesses are already investing their money in it. The problem with Facebook, in my opinion, is they should have been charging to utilize Facebook, or utilize Facebook different services like Facebook groups or Facebook Messenger or Facebook photos, you know. So those are some tools to where they could have charged like $1 a month, or $12 a year, or $10 a year, save you $2. If
Had they introduced these fees
5-8 years ago,
right? And then if they put this message on here that, you know, help keep Facebook, you know,
low,
under
cheap,
$1 or
right?
cheap or whatever, then they may, you know, have had a fighting chance with this whole strategy. But because it's been free so long, people are like, nah, it's not that serious. And the fact that the amount of people who are moving away from Facebook, I mean, I think they would, you know, kind of sell themselves out of their market share.
Because basically, you know, just based on my, like I said, non-statistical poll, there are some people who, if they're willing to not allow Facebook to track them across apps and websites, there could be a case of where millions and millions and millions of people be like, yeah, you want to charge me for Facebook? Nah, I'm just not going to use Facebook anymore. And they're willing to give up all of the freedoms, quote unquote, that Facebook gives us, all the features rather that Facebook gives us, because there are a lot of people who are completely dependent on Facebook. But if you have to charge them for it, then they may not be so as dependent as Facebook likes to think. So all that to say, to bring this back to the actual story, you know, Facebook threatening, quote unquote, threatening people with give us your data or we're going to have to charge you to use Facebook. That bluff may not work out in their favor.
And I think their bluff has already shown to fail when they did the ads in the newspapers about, you know, we're really here for the small businesses. They should have taken a cue from that to see that people were not moved.
Right.
Instead of this whole thing. I haven't seen this on my Facebook yet, I don't believe.
No, I haven't yet either. Probably because I went through the process. I don't know if I had it as a hookup or not, but I actually went through the process to remove myself from all of Facebook's ad tracking. You know, there's like
I did that too. Maybe that's why I haven't seen it.
Yeah, there's a bunch of little bitty steps. You got to click this and click that, and then click this and click that. So I think for the people who have not went through that, maybe they're getting that pop up where one button stops it versus, you know, being a tech savvy person going through all the Facebook settings, and they make it confusing on purpose.
On purpose.
For you not to do it, you know. But for those who haven't done it, then now they're getting that one button, yes or no, right? All right. So moving on to the next story, we kind of talked about this in our pre-show. For those who are not a part of the Patreon, definitely subscribe to our Patreon so you can get access to the extra exclusive content. Like I mentioned, we talked about cryptocurrency in our pre-show, and this story came up that Sotheby's, the auction house, is accepting cryptocurrency for a Banksy auction. Banksy's Love is in the Air physical painting is an
Of course, it's for Banksy.
Of course it is. You know, the popular people, the young kids, people that the kids know, right? Is a Love is in the Air is a physical painting, and is estimated to go for over anywhere between $3 million and $5 million. If you're interested in buying it and you're one of these crypto kids, buyers, right? Buyers will have the option to either use Bitcoin or Ethereum for payment. The auction house is partnered with cryptocurrency exchange Coinbase for the sale. Coinbase said in a blog post that it would help manage price fluctuations during the auction in New York next week. So all that to say, you know, if you balling like that,
you got it
right with Bitcoin or Ethereum, and you're looking for some artwork to increase your wealth. We mentioned that, you know, cryptocurrency values are heavily fluctuating. So by the time you get into this auction to the time that the auction ending, the value of your Bitcoin may change. So that's why Coinbase, who recently IPO'd, I want to say 2 or 3 weeks ago, they are basically a cryptocurrency, I want to say wallet, because it's not a true wallet. It's just a marketplace. Better word is a marketplace where you can buy and sell and trade most of the cryptocurrency on the market. So they're going to partner with Sotheby's. But the reason why I want to put this up, because it is interesting, because like we mentioned in the pre-show, you don't see it very often. It is still kind of complicated to go through the whole cryptocurrency process. But entities like Sotheby's normalizing cryptocurrency transactions could mean a lot to the future of cryptocurrency. So I just
definitely Sotheby's is like the biggest auction house in the world.
Yep. So
and people go there to spend millions of dollars on very fancy high-end things.
Right. So if they're willing to use cryptocurrency to spend millions of dollars, then, that could lend some,
credibility.
This is exactly the word I'm looking for. Credibility to cryptocurrency, to where even more places, like we've mentioned, Tesla offers buy and sell things with cryptocurrency. Some major, if you want to buy NFTs, if you want to buy digital products, most of those transactions are via cryptocurrency. So sooner or later, we're going to be telling more and sharing more and more stories of more and more companies, businesses, merchants, what have you, accepting cryptocurrency, to where eventually it's going to become, just as valuable as as actual a dollar, cold hard cash. So I just want to put that out there, because like I said, if Sotheby's is doing it, I'm pretty sure other businesses are kind of churning in the, in the ideas of how they can offer this to users.
Right.
Yep. All right. So moving on, Twitter, their Clubhouse competitor Spaces opens up to anyone with 600, with a minimum of 600 followers. So I thought this was interesting, because Clubhouse, I think they're still on there. You got to know somebody to know somebody to know somebody,
invite,
right, to get in. Twitter, they're trying to compete against Clubhouse and their Spaces app. Not only are they just opening up to anyone with 600 followers, but something they're also doing that I didn't put in the notes is they're giving you the ability to charge for to charge for Spaces. So that's something I don't think Clubhouse has the functionality to do yet. So I guess the question I wanted to ask,
I think they do have it, but it's in very limited. I want to say I remember seeing something where you can pay people, but I think it's in very limited spaces.
Right. So, all that to say, Clubhouse has owned the space for, better part of a year, but they are very limited in what you can and can't do on Clubhouse versus Twitter Spaces, lower barrier of entry, and they're more enticing.
And it's 600. You have to have 600K following to get the payment.
To get the payment, you got to have 600,000, right? But to get on,
I'm sorry, 60,000.
60,000, okay. But just to get on to Spaces, you have at least 600 followers. And in addition to that, since it's built into Twitter, right? Because you think of, I haven't used Twitter, but basically Clubhouse is like Voice, right? You have these spaces where people talk, you can moderate, you can raise questions, this whole conversation
keep
thing.
People out of it, right? All that stuff.
But with Spaces, since it's connected to Twitter, and I'll just read this quote from the story: you can enter as a listener to react with emoji, see pinned tweets, message folks, follow along with captions, or request to speak. Join as a speaker. You can talk, you can pin tweets, you can turn on captions, and you can share space with others. I'm not a Clubhouse.
I've done Twitter Spaces. I've been in a couple of spaces, and it's easy to, request to speak. And I have on a couple, and you can kind of like swipe down to like minimize it and still scroll your Twitter feed.
Right.
So you could still get to see your Twitter feed and be engaged to whatever level you feel comfortable with on the Twitter Spaces, and you don't have that function with Clubhouse.
And that was leading me to my point. Are some of these competitors to Clubhouse eventually going to eclipse Clubhouse if they can offer more features like pinning tweets, messaging people on the platform, using Twitter's broader functionality within the spaces. What does this mean for Clubhouse? Even though they were the first, but they, the barrier entry is lower for our competitors and you can do more things.
And the fact that it was kind of like a whole exclusive club invite, it still is like invite only, that I'm sure kind of throws some people off as well, as like, oh, you have to be a certain type of person to get into Clubhouse. Whereas anybody with a Twitter account, I think I've had Spaces for quite a while now. They pushed out to different users, but now pretty much anybody on Twitter can have access to Spaces and access to host Spaces,
right?
Which appears to be a much easier process than with Clubhouse.
And it's not just limited to iOS users. I think Spaces, quote me if I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure if you got an Android as well,
yep,
you
however
can utilize
you use
it.
Twitter.
Yep. So yeah, it will be interesting to see what Clubhouse does to remain on top, because like I mentioned, they are the first. So, with the first comes a lot of cachet. There is still something to be said with exclusivity, that drives up the demand more when less people can get on. There's still something to be said about that, but for how long, right? So it'll be interesting,
especially
to see.
with what Facebook coming out with their own version,
right?
And LinkedIn, they're coming with something similar because they have stories now.
And it seems to make more sense on LinkedIn because LinkedIn is more business oriented in theory.
I think you can have like meet and greets with people who you're interested in hiring or connecting with. I think that probably has a better use case than just, what it's used for, in Twitter.
Right. Yep. All right. So moving on, a company, Skydio, shipping enterprise drones at $11,000 a piece. Now that sounds like a lot, but if you recognize what Skydio, what their targeted audience is, they have law enforcement, military, first responder versions in addition to their enterprise drones. Reason why that's important is because Skydio switched from consumer to enterprise after US had that big issue with Chinese companies. The most popular Chinese drone company out there is DJI. DJI owns the drone space as far as consumers are concerned. If I go to Best Buy or go to Amazon or go anywhere to look for a drone,
that's all you're going to see is DJI.
All you're going to see is DJI. But the problem with DJI is, especially for governments, enterprise, military, first responder, US, right. It's Chinese based, and United States, China, they have this weird relationship. Yeah. So what makes Skydio a good option for enterprise, even though it's $11,000 a piece, and of course they've got all the extra features. They got all camera this, they got 5G that, all these other features to probably justify the cost. But that puts Skydio in a good position because any sort of enterprise, if you're going to be law enforcement, if you're going to be anywhere near an airport, you're going to need a US made drone company in order to fulfill your needs. So that puts them in a good position, and as a result, just proof is in the pudding. That change going from consumer to enterprise boosted Skydio to $1 billion valuation. Wow. Again, since military and law enforcement
contracts.
Exactly. Since government, military, law enforcement are now looking for US made options. So I guess I just wanted to ask, we've heard, we talked about Uber doing some sort of autonomous. We've talked about Amazon doing drone drop-offs, which I'm pretty sure is coming. So then now you have a company like Skydio offering an enterprise drone for military, for first responders. Just think of, just for a perfect example, right? You talked about in the pre-show about, the your storms that happened
Mm-hmm.
over the week that kind of had people kind of panicked in Atlanta, in Georgia, surrounding areas about tornadoes, right? Imagine if, law enforcement or first responders can send a drone to actually take a geographical mapping of the area that was hit by a tornado, or down power lines, or down trees, or some flooded area to where you can't send a regular person in. You can send this drone in, take a map of the area, get all the specs, figure out exactly what you need without even sending somebody down there. So all that to say, I just want to get your stance on whether or not you think drones or other unmanned aerial vehicles will be more present in our future.
Definitely. I don't think drones are going anywhere. I think, if anything, they're going to be expanded more, not just for consumer use, as we've seen with, this Skydio. The fact that the US government is probably the biggest, I guess, purveyor of money, because it seems to be endless money. They can always print up new money if necessary. And then when you think about the stealth and covert operations that they're trying to do, whether it's, domestic or international, and the fact that this is a company that the US can feel relatively safe, using, because it is not a foreign based company. I think they've put themselves in a great position to be used, because they're filling a gap in the market that isn't there. And quite frankly, I can very easily see somebody like an Amazon snapping up this company,
Right.
and saying, you know
Yep.
what?
Yep.
Why do we have to come up with our own drones to drop these packages? We can just buy these people because they're only $1 billion. That's chump change.
Right.
Let's just buy them and integrate them into our fleet. And then the government, as much as the previous guy hated Amazon, it's one of those things where we have supply and demand. We have the goods, you need them. We own them. So what you gonna do?
Right. Yeah.
Drop this money and keep it moving.
Yep, that makes a good point, to put them in a position where somebody will buy them up, instead of starting from the ground up. Of course, Amazon probably could start from the ground up and become a competitor to Skydio, but they rather just scoop them up anyway. And like I mentioned, the fact that they have boosted them to about $1 billion valuation, if they were to ever go public, if they ever were to get sold, or to offer the, entertain the idea of being bought, that make, the more money you're worth, the more valuable you become,
Exactly.
So you definitely could see a Amazon competitor getting them before Amazon does, like a Walmart, or
Somebody with deep pockets.
right. UPS, we're talking about them, in the future, some of these other logistics, shipping, some of these other companies, looking to get into the drone game, because again, it's not going anywhere, so, might as well, jump into one of these companies. So yeah, definitely be interesting. All right. Moving along to the last story for the second string. Uber has committed to offer a fully electric car by 2030. They're working with a British car manufacturer named Arrival. Uber and Arrival are inviting Uber drivers to help in the design process to ensure it delivers everything they need for ride-hailing duties. The Arrival car is expected to go into production the third quarter of 2023, and in the UK will use Arrival's small vehicle platform. So basically, what they're going to do is they're going to build micro factories in some of the major areas to where they'll be shipping some of these Arrival cars in addition to their bus and small vehicle platform. So this Arrival company already makes electric cargo vans. They make electric, cargo vans for moving people, moving equipment. You think of like, your cable guy comes to your house. That's a cargo van. So, Arrival already makes these all electric cargo vans for people like UPS. They've already got a deal to where UPS is ordering 10,000 electric vehicle delivery vans from Arrival to be delivered by 2024. So I guess, with your new, interest, your new skills, your new, talent when it comes to autonomous and electric vehicles, what does this say for Uber to have an electric vehicle by 2030 rather?
So what I've gathered, I don't know if there was some big meeting with everybody and they decided 2030 was the year, how they came up with that, but everybody seems to be on this 2030 wave, saying, we're going to have this by 2030. I don't know if it's because a major car company that I am aware of has said that they will be the plan is to be zero emissions by 2030, all electric by 2030. I don't know if other companies have kind of jumped on that wave to try and keep pace with that. But it appears as if 2030 is the year that we're going to see electric vehicles from everybody. And this is from your big car dealerships domestically. I mean, GM, Ford, out to your international car manufacturers, Toyota, and all of these different car vendors. They're all, and now Uber are now all on this 2030 wave. So I think what it says is that's pretty much the gold standard of being able to say that you have an electric vehicle. Because if you have these huge car companies saying they're going to be all electric by 2030, they're going to have to be able to compete on that level and say we have our fleet is now all electric just to stay competitive. Because one company decided this 2030, everyone else is trying to really follow suit. But I think this is pretty much where everybody's trying to go. This is the hot thing in vehicles right now, is first electric, and then autonomous is right behind it. And as you alluded to my new exploits in the autonomous space, it's, that's really what the drive is for. And in the new work that I'm doing, we're literally creating from scratch.
Right.
Because it hasn't been done before.
Right.
And, that's really what I think they're trying to be on board with. And even I think when Apple did their announcement, they indicated they were trying to get to zero emissions by 2030 as well. So I just think people are being more conscious of the environment. And honestly, I don't even think it's necessarily consciousness of environment. I think it's just making sure that they stay on the competitive edge. Because if you have these other billion-dollar Fortune 5 companies, saying that this is what they're going to do, everyone is really having to step up to that same time frame.
Right. Well, what I think it is 2030 in particular, spread out those costs. Because like you mentioned, people got to build from the ground up. They've got to figure out what really separates them from like a Tesla, so they really have to really put some thought and put some money behind this. Because what companies are not going to do is take billion-dollar losses in 1 or 2 years in order to get to zero emissions by 2025, right? Which is just in 4 years, right? Or 2023. What in order to do that, and this is just me being a cynic, me being a skeptic, but knowing how businesses work, right?
It's all about the dollar.
Because some of these companies could say, well, our whole fleet is going to be, zero emissions or all electric by 2024, but that's going to take billions of dollars in costs, in research, in development.
And that's if they can get that done by then. So I think they don't want to pin themselves in a corner so much to say we're going to do it early, especially when there's so many other people that have it 2030. It's so we're pretty much on course with them.
Right.
And then if something doesn't quite flesh out and is not ready by 2030, they'll have some room to try and, come up with their excuses or their rationale on what they're doing.
But I believe they could do it. If a big company wanted to make their entire fleet all electric by 2025, they could do it. But the way costs work, the way stock market works,
the way we're coming off this pandemic works,
right, that would take a lot of investments, and I don't think upfront, and I don't think companies, the way they work, credit versus debit and all this other revenue versus income, I don't think companies would melt down before they could do that. So 10 years, what 9 years from now, they can spread that out over
that gives them a decade.
Right.
Because when they say 2030, trust and believe this has been in the works, before this 10-year phase. And I could say that for certain that this isn't just something they're coming up with, in some arbitrary number. Trust and believe that there has been feasibility, there's been POCs on this, there's been all the things related to all the money kind of fleshed out, worst case scenario, best case scenario, to ensure that they hit these targets.
Right. All right. But yeah, the fact that Uber is committing to having a fully electric car to offer as part of their ride hailing fleet by 2030 means that, similar to crypto, similar to drones, UAVs, electric vehicles, autonomous vehicles is the wave of the future. So if you're looking for a place to invest, a place to put your money, you're looking for some future technology to where you can
start there.
Yep. Start with electric vehicles, start with drones, start with cryptocurrency. All right. So that is it for Second String. Let's move on to For the Culture. This story is pretty interesting for me, and For the Culture, because, there's a scientist who has decided to leave Google and has joined Apple. Well, most of the reasons why people kind of switch from companies, they get better offer, they get, to lead a particular management team, or they get to, work on their dream project. Well, this particular scientist has decided to leave the artificial intelligence research department from Google to join Apple, because this scientist, his last name is Bengio. Let me look at the story if I get his first name here. But he decided to leave Google.
Sammy.
Yeah, Sammy Bengio has decided to leave Bengio. I hope I said this name right. But he's decided to leave Google to join Apple to be an ally, for lack of a better term. He expressed support for fellow scientist Margaret Mitchell after alleging she transferred electric files out of the company, and Timnit Gebru. We talked about her in previous shows after she threatened to quit rather than retract the paper.
And they fired her.
Right. In both of those instances, a minority or a black person or person of color had an issue with the race and diversity and inclusion of their particular company, in this case, Google.
She wrote about it.
Spoke out about it in both of those cases. Google had to own up to it and say, yes, we're, their whole PR statement that they make. But then they blame, or they, cast judgment, or they, speak out internally against the same people who raise the questions about diversity and inclusion in some of these companies. So being an ally, of course, I'm 100% sure that wasn't his total 100% reason as to why he left Google. But the fact that he publicly,
that's what he's claiming is the reason.
Right. Why. Publicly expressed support for those scientists that were targeted and let go and or fired because of those scientists speaking out against Google's so-called race, equality, and inclusion practices.
Right. And they aren't just regular Google scientists.
Right.
These were the foremost leading experts in AI at Google.
Right. So you would think Google would prop them up. You would think Google would put them to the forefront. Google would, at the very least, use them to say, see, diversity and inclusion. No.
You got a brown person,
right,
and they're both women.
Right. Nope. These women, these scientists brought up the issue. Google had to own up to it, and then they retaliated against these scientists. So,
and it's still going on. Timid is still, I follow her on Twitter. She's still to this day being harassed by the tech bros behind this.
Of course she is. So yes, all that to say, the reason why I brought it up is because it's a nice to see that an ally, decided that they were going to do more than just tweet, more than just get on Facebook and, have this long, speech about, my best friend's black, they
I
actually,
have a black person in my family.
right, right. I've worked with black people. It was a shame what happened to him, but yeah, he
One of my
actually,
best friends is black.
right, he actually decided to do something about it, in part or majority reason why, but it was interesting to see that he actually decided to, leave one of these major companies, possibly put his career in jeopardy. Now, of course, he moved to Apple, which that he ain't jeopardizing his coins from moving to Google to Apple.
He got coins.
Right. But at the same time, he'd been there for 14 years. I'm pretty sure he had a lot of cachet. Pretty sure he had a lot of say. He was probably very comfortable, for him to decide to make that change in
Yeah, I
support.
just looked him up, and he was known for leading a large group of researchers working in machine learning, including adversarial settings. So he
Yep.
was kind of a big deal.
Yep. Yep. He was a big deal. So, it's safe to say Google has lost out on a valuable asset to a
At this
competitor,
point.
right? To a competitor,
Yeah.
because of internal,
Racism.
racial, racism, equality, inclusivity, some of those concerns. So it'd be interesting to see, if other people, maybe not leave the company, but maybe start to speak out in solidarity versus doing the, direct message or the secret, support of some of these people, who are in the battle, with some of these companies as it relates to diversity inclusion.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, the timing of this is very interesting as well. We talked about it last week at base camp. All that hubbub, it's still going on, and I can't remember if we mentioned it or not, but they were offering buyouts to anybody who didn't feel comfortable working at the company anymore. And a third of those people that worked at base camp took the
Oh,
buyout
wow. Wow.
and left. So it's a smaller company. I think they only have maybe 50 or 60 employees. They lost about 20.
Right.
And the people they lost were heads of groups. So they lost a lot of people because they just didn't feel comfortable
Right.
with what was going on. I read an article where they talked about there was an all hands meeting after all this happened, and a black employee, quit on the spot because of the conversation that was being had on the call. One of the co-founders was like, "Oh, I'm in bed, I'm sick." He said, "Hey," or whatever, then turned off his mic and turned off his camera and left the other co-founder to pretty much take all of the questions from the employees. And one
Wow.
of the big things that came up with that was I think it was the head of strategy. He said that he didn't think that white supremacy was essentially a thing. And I'm paraphrasing here. And when a black person came on and was like, "Yeah, it is a thing. How can you say that?" He doubled down several times. And so they eventually ended up putting him on suspension, pending an internal probe. And I think the guy ultimately decided to resign. But this is after the heads, I think it was Jason Fried and DHH. I don't know what. I think it's Davidson
right.
something. Right. So even after they doubled down on the policy several times after that, they just now, I think it was today, came out and was like, "Well, we handled it wrong. We shouldn't have went about it that way." But they were still saying, "We said what we said.
Right.
Sorry that you're leaving, but people decided to stay, so we're gonna work with them. Hey, customers, don't cancel us because we still need your money." But the policies still stay in place,
Right.
and they are moving forward with them, and they were happy and fine with 30% of a third of their workforce saying, "Nah, this isn't for me."
Right.
So it's just one of those things that goes to show, whether these folks left in allyship, because I think some of them were, some of the people who left because they are black and brown people and saw that this company didn't really support or care for them.
Or
And
just didn't care in general.
just didn't care in general, yeah.
It doesn't necessarily have to be what can we do for the black people, right?
Right.
It could be just something as simple as
Human decency.
we care in general, and we're not going to be a company that all we care about is line items on an Excel spreadsheet. When it comes to speaking out, speaking up for, and supporting the people that work for us, because that's what a lot of people who work in corporate now, are starting to come to the realization, especially in the midst of all of this racial justice. This racial justice could just be, for a lot of people, it could just be the tipping point, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they've
that's
always
what they said. That's what several people said
right
in the meeting, is that meeting and that conversation solidified for them. They had to quit.
Right.
It was like for people who were, it appeared that they were still going to stay on the company. But after they had heard that 2-hour conversation, they were like, yo, this is not for me. I got to bounce. And they did.
Right. And it could just be, like I said, the whole, in the midst of George Floyd and, all that stuff is going on. That could have just been the tipping point for a lot of people to come to a realization that these corporations are not
out for the people who make their company.
Right. They are. It's about revenue. It's about profits, and anything that tests that, anything that jeopardizes that. Mm-hmm. These companies are going to choose themselves, the entity,
every single time,
over the people, right? And I think people are just finally kind of coming to that realization.
Yeah.
And it just, at the time, it's racial diversity and inclusion. It could be pay for whatever reason. It could have been Me Too movement. It could be disability. It could be
anything.
Right.
They see that these folks are about the bottom line dollar. And in the case of, Basecamp, the founders, you can't get rid of them. One, there's no board. Two, is their company. So they can honestly, to their detriment or not, make unilateral decisions. And you as an employee can either choose to stay and deal with it or roll and be like, this isn't for me. And I think at the end of the day, especially if you think about it in terms of COVID, the folks that are still having to go into work and people are like, look, this is about, we need you to come in. If you're not going to come in, then we can let you go.
Right.
It's just showing that at the end of the day, the dollar rules, and you're being devoted to this company and giving it your all and doing all these things. And then they turn around and give you their butt to kiss because it's like, we can take it or leave it.
Yep. And people are starting to leave it. Right. So that goes with this scientist, Bengio at Google, deciding to leave to join Apple. Like you mentioned, it goes with a lot of these employees at Basecamp who decided to leave. These companies are really, going to have to reckon with the idea of, what kind of company are we really, mm-hmm. and make it known, all of these press release, these social media press releases is not cutting it, as well as they thought it was, because people are asking for, okay, well, that's just words. What are you actually doing? And again, like I mentioned, these companies, revenue and costs and, profits, actually attacking an issue like diversity and inclusion in a corporation is going to take millions of dollars to reinvest in how their policies, how they're hiring, how they're reviewing, all of these policies. And companies really don't want to spend that major cost in that short amount of time. Now if they can spread it out over 50 years, but I mean, that's incremental change. It's not going to get anywhere when people are asking for change now. So they're like, right. Okay, well, do we invest $500 million in this? And we got to write that on our balance sheet. That's going to make a negative hit on our revenue, because a lot of these companies are in debt so much to where
they don't have no emergency savings.
Right. They ain't got no emergency savings fund, right? They ain't got no rating day fund, right? So nope. That's going to take a hit. So a lot of these companies are trying to figure out how to weasel their way around it, when weaseling your way around the issue is not going to change the issue. It's not going to stop the issue. So,
yep. Exactly.
All right. So that is it for the culture. Definitely move into the hookup. So one of the cool things that I saw, with iOS 14.5 and 14.5.1 was they made some improvements to AirPods, specifically to where when you connect your watch to your Bluetooth headset like AirPods or AirPod Max or AirPods Pro, any Apple related device, they've improved the connectivity. iOS 14.5, before that, rather, a lot of people were having issues with the switching. If I've got a MacBook and I've got an iPad, I've got an iPhone, the switching when on my headphones, the Apple versions, they've made that a lot smoother. Well, one of the things that you can do if you don't have an Apple branded Bluetooth speaker or Bluetooth AirPods, like if you have Bose or if you have Bang & Olufsen, if you have Sennheiser, some of these other non-Apple branded Bluetooth devices that you connect with your Apple Watch, well, there's a tip to where you can identify or classify the type of speaker that you're connecting to your watch for improved audio notifications and for headphone audio level measurements that will be more accurate. But what you have to do is you have to classify that device on your Apple Watch. So basically what you do is from your Apple Watch screen, you go to the settings app on your Apple Watch screen, you tap Bluetooth, and then you go next to the device that's already paired to your Apple Watch. So you got to make sure your Bose headphones or your Bluetooth speakers are already paired with your Apple Watch. Locate that device. You click the eye, the little blue eye next in the circle next to that device. You tap the device type and you get an option. All the device types are, you can choose between headphones, you can choose between a hearing aid, you can choose between a speaker, or you can choose between other. Selecting that classification will give you better audio notifications and better audio level measurements. So that's my tip for the week. If you use a non-Apple speaker, Bluetooth headphone device with your Apple Watch, you want to make sure you classify that correctly in your Apple Watch to get better audio quality.
Nice.
All right. So that is my tip for the week. And Nika, if you don't have anything else, I think that's going to end the show for the week. As usual, we definitely appreciate your support. One of the ways you can support us is if you download, rate, and review the show. We're on Apple Podcasts, we're on Google Podcasts, and we're on Spotify. Another way, if you can just simply engage with us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, we're at SnobOScast. Definitely, you can watch us on YouTube. We're at SnobOScast. And of course, if you watch us on YouTube, be sure to like, subscribe, hit the notifications bell, and make us look good with YouTube. Also, you can leave comments and suggestions. You can do so by going to our website. We're at snoboscast.com, or you can shoot us an email. We're at snoboscast@gmail.com. Another way is to support the show financially. You can become a Patreon supporter for as little as $5 a month. You'll get access to our pre-show. You'll get access to the show live, so you get it a couple days earlier, and you get access to our community. Definitely, we want to thank all of our Patreon supporters who are watching this live and getting it 2 days early than you actually get the show. You can also support us, give us a love offering via PayPal. You can find us by going to paypal.me/snobos, and you can give us a little, little $1, little praise.
Just a little seasoning.
Yeah, give us a little something, we definitely appreciate it. Everything. We appreciate it all. So like I said, other than that, we are done for this week. Until next week, we are out. Peace.
Bye.